Hello there.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Happy Sunday, friends and lovers, and thank you for joining us. Oh my gosh, this is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. I am the aforementioned Robert Nasir. I am joined by the lovely, gracious, wicked smart co-host Amy Nasir. And you know who you are.
You're so cool and awesome because
It
you
is
are with us.
Too much. It's all too much. Today is 2/21/2021. 2/21/2021. February 21st, 2021, the 52nd day of 2021. 313 days remaining in the year, 307 days until Christmas, 253 days until Halloween, and today is National Sticky Bun Day. I hope everybody's got a sticky. Here's our we've got a cinnamon roll. We went on a journey. And this is a journey that started on Tuesday when we celebrated what is commonly known as Punchki Day. Or if you've never seen or heard the word, it looks like it's spelled Pakzaki Day.
Yes, Pakzaki.
Why it's pronounced Punchki, I don't know.
It's Polish.
Yes, so I was sent out by somebody, I won't say who, to find us Punchkis for Punchki Day.
That'd be you.
On Punchki Day. Last minute, oh, do we have any Punchkis for Punchki Day? No, we don't. Would you like me to go out and get... So anyway, I had the hardest time finding a chocolate Punchki.
Ooh, so delicious.
I went to 3 different places. Anyway, the point is, today is National Sticky Bun Day. We hope you're going to celebrate it with us, but we also went 3 different places in search of a sticky bun.
Yes.
0 luck. So the closest we could do is a cinnamon roll, so there you go. Empty carbohydrates for those of you who worship such things. The carnivores out there are saying, you're not going to eat that crap, are you? I'm going to leave that a mystery for the listeners. Besides being National Sticky Bun Day, on this date, Jerry Harrison was born. That's right. Keyboard and guitar player for Talking Heads turns 72 today. He was born in 1949. Also, a happy but sad day, Alan Rickman was born. Happy birthday, Alan Rickman,
yes.
Up in heaven.
Happy birthday, dear Snape. Happy birthday, dear Snape. In honor of Alan Rickman, a.k.a. Snape's birthday,
Yes.
I am wearing the Slytherin locket.
That's what that is. That's
yeah.
Slytherin's locket.
And it's making me have a really bad mood. And
it's kind of like carrying an evil ring for too long. Are you sure you should be wearing that?
It's okay. It's all right. And I looked inside of it, and it's got our friend Voldemort eyeballs.
All right. So the eyes of Voldemort are on us all.
These are real.
Or are we supposed to say he who should not be named? I forget. Did that give him power, or did that take away his power? They said don't be afraid to say his name, but it turns out that was causing all sorts of bad juju, right?
Hello. Hi there.
It's time to reread the Harry Potter series.
I'm Moldymort.
Moldymort.
Moldymort. So anyway, I'm going to be a Slytherin for this episode.
Oh, well.
And I'm going to be...
You're going to let the locket do the talking?
Cruel and
I'll bet you
overbearing.
Yes, everybody's believing that. That's for sure.
Yes.
Amy's going to be horrible. Well, in keeping with now the level of dignity to which we've raised the show, today is also the day that the National Association for Stock Car Racing was established.
Vroom.
NASCAR was founded, a multi-billion-dollar industry, but founded on this date in 1948. Yes, but I'm going to go back to National Sticky Buns, because although Sticky Buns came from Germany and cinnamon rolls came from Sweden.
I don't know. Talladega Nights was a really funny movie.
Talladega Nights was a really funny movie. And
I'm just going to be laughing a lot.
If you weren't introduced to the charming Amy Adams in Enchanted, you probably were in Talladega Nights.
Yes. Hey, I want to give a shout out to Holly, Narendra, Jennifer.
Oh, folks are in the chat. Outstanding.
Yeah, and Jennifer is also on YouTube.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we need to get those YouTube numbers up. Hey, everybody watching us on YouTube, give us a like.
Please do.
Click the thumb up guy. We're so technologically advanced here. I think it's the thumbs up thing, and yes.
I'm going to put the YouTube link in the Facebook comments.
Excellent.
Because I can.
You can. You do those things. What are we listening to this week? Well, what I'm listening to this week is the Lex Fridman Podcast. Now, I was introduced to Lex Fridman, spelled Fridman, if you're looking for it. Link will be in the show notes, Fridman. But Lex Fridman, interestingly enough, I found out about him from Yarn Brook. Lex Fridman is sympathetic to objectivism, and he had a great conversation with Yarn. So I thought, well, I got to look this guy up, check him out. It turns out Lex Fridman, actually born Alexei Fedotov, was born in Moscow, Russia. Came to America after grade school, got his BSc, MSc, and PhD. He's a research scientist at MIT, studying AI. He's a martial arts black belt, jiu-jitsu, and judo. This guy is and it's funny because if you watch his podcasts, he's really unassuming. He just seems like
he is
some guy.
I didn't know this.
And it turns out he's like super smart. He's also incredibly successful. He's got 500,000 subscribers. He's had over 36 million views of his podcast.
Oh my goodness.
He's got a Patreon that puts ours to shame. Hint, hint. But this guy's amazing. So I've only heard a couple of things by Lex Fridman, spelled Fridman. But I got to check him out some more. If anybody else knows more about Lex Fridman than I do, feel free to share it in the chat. But that leads me to what's on my mind this week. I teased the subject a little bit last week when I stated a profound observation, and my profound observation is certainly right up there with anything that the PhD Lex Fridman would say was, psychology is a thing. You'll remember that from last week's show, that profound observation that psychology is a thing that exists.
It's like totally
a thing. I had been making notes. These were my insomnia notes.
Oh, right.
Notes that I wrote at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when I woke up, couldn't sleep, and had these brilliant thoughts, which I wrote down and didn't seem as brilliant in the morning. But one of the things I wrote was, why do we need to remind ourselves, to reassure ourselves of things we already know, of things we know are true? This is knowledge. It's just stuff we know. Simple facts like water is wet and sunshine is warm and I am good and I am capable and I can at any time call upon enormous knowledge and insight and strength and courage and passion, all of which are part of me, of who I am, of what I've done before, and can and will do again. Why do we need to remind ourselves of things we already know when they come down to our own mind, our own character, our own psychology? I mentioned that last week, and it got me thinking about the mind and the fact that the facts of our mind, of what we are, of who we are, they aren't in our mind the same way as external knowledge. And there are reasons for that, and they're kind of important reasons. But first and foremost, it's worth knowing philosophy ain't everything. Psychology is a thing. See, next month, March 2021. Can you believe next month is March 2021? What's up with that? Next month, March 2021, is the 50th anniversary of Ayn Rand's essay, The Psychology of Psychologizing.
Yes.
First published in her periodical The Objectivist in March of 1971, and republished in 1989 as part of the anthology The Voice of Reason, Essays in Objectivist Thought. I was already talking about psychology this week because of Lex Fridman's podcast and because of my observations last week, and Amy said, well, what about the essay, The Psychology of Psychologizing? And I thought, well, I know what psychologizing is. I know what she's talking about. I know what she's warning people against.
But it's
I'm
been
not
a
sure
while
that I'm not sure that really relates, but I thought, well, I'll read that out loud, which I love to do.
And he did.
And I recommend this. Read things out loud.
And Robert's an excellent reader.
Well, I don't know about that. Thank you.
Is great.
But reading something out loud, it's like reading poetry. You can't read poetry looking in a book. Even if you've got a great voice in your head, you're that kind of person who hears things when you read them. Reading it out loud is a different experience. So I read this, and it's long, and I'm not going to read it to you right now, but I am going to read a little bit of one paragraph. Mm-hmm. The part that I didn't remember from having read it before, but which, because Amy reminded me, made me think, oh, Amy's smarter than I am. And here's the paragraph. A layman needs some knowledge of medicine in order to know how to take care of his own body and when to call the doctor. The same principle applies to psychology. A layman needs some knowledge of psychology in order to understand the nature of a human consciousness. But theoretical knowledge does not qualify him for the extremely specialized job of diagnosing the psychopathological problems of specific individuals. Even self-diagnosis is often dangerous. There is such a thing as a phenomenon of psychological hypochondriacs who ascribe to themselves every problem they hear or read about.
So what's interesting about that was Robert had said to me, I want to talk about biases and logic and psychology, and there are certain principles that, without having to go out and, earn yourself a PhD in any of these disciplines, you should look out for, you should know, and are fairly simple to know. Mm-hmm. And you should definitely have those in your philosophical and psychological toolkit to keep, to basically get the best out of life, and obviously to protect yourself in some ways. Yeah. So it was interesting that Ayn Rand actually, and in Psychology of Psychologizing, by the way, it is just an amazing, it's like, she's, I don't know if she really liked jazz or not, probably not, but she was like a jazz musician up on stage riffing and like making all of these amazing, melodies and harmonies and work together and everything. So it's just a brilliant article.
It's funny that,
and it's far-reaching, and you wouldn't expect where it's going. It's great.
We pointed that out. Was it last week or the week before? How when we were looking, for example, for definitions of love, some of Ayn Rand's most brilliant observations on love are in articles that have nothing to do with love and romance, but they're just in there, and they end up all tying together. It's amazing. But a bit of a spoiler alert, Amy really just gave you the takeaway of this whole discussion I'd like to have. Uh-oh. So let's see if I can get there, if I can actually justify that.
Okay.
I read Psychology of Psychologizing, and at the time, people, including objectivists, were writing about how psychology is hardly even a science yet. It's really in its infancy. Now, this is 1971, so there's still a lot of psychoanalysis, mm-hmm. a lot of therapies based loosely or even directly on Sigmund Freud.
Which is awful.
Which is putting a little too much emphasis on the idea of these conflicting selves, your id and your ego and your superego and your desire to sleep with your mother and kill your father. And
nonsense.
We've come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
We've come a long way in psychology, as Freud is now viewed critically at best, and at least a substantial part of the profession has embraced reasonable, even rational therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, mm-hmm. and other thought-oriented approaches, mm-hmm. as opposed to pathology-oriented approaches. In particular, it's quite commonplace in discussions both online and out there, you know what I mean by out there, mm-hmm. someplace besides the internet, the real world, to point out biases and fallacies, something I don't recall that much of before the internet. I mean, none of this is new, but just normal, intelligent people are now familiar with some of the most common failure modes of human thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's just... I was going to say awesome, but that's just, no, awesome's the right word. Yeah, that's just awesome.
It's amazingly beautiful is what that is.
Yeah.
It's
as you say, it's part of your toolkit, and now everybody's got access to it.
Right, and we're just so much more empowered in the year 2021 now than we were, even 20 years ago.
Yes. It's returning amazing. For a moment to Lex Fridman. One of the podcasts I listened to this week to catch up with who this guy is his episode 65. I've got a link in our show notes. You can click that after the show. And he had a discussion with Daniel Kahneman, the brilliant genius who also wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which is pretty mm-hmm. brilliant. This is anyway, I won't get into Daniel Kahneman too much, but the book is worth reading, but the interview is worth listening to. And he covered a lot of different subjects. Now I got thinking about fast and slow, and now I forgot where I was going with that.
Lex Fridman.
What did you just say before that?
I was talking about Slytherin's locket.
Okay, it's going back a little too far.
We were
in any event,
about...
I do recommend that you listen to Lex Fridman's discussion with Daniel Kahneman, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow.
We were talking about the fact that you were talking about the toolkit, the layman's toolkit, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Well, let me skip and we'll come back to that, because I'm sure I'll remember. I had asked on social media, I asked folks, kind of whimsically, for their favorite biases and fallacies. And I actually got answers. Incidentally, my favorite bias is, or my favorite fallacy, rather, which is a informal logical fallacy. And that is hasty generalization.
Yeah.
I think anybody who knows me knows that would be it.
Wait, your least favorite or your favorite?
Well, it's my least favorite thing that people do.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's my favorite in that you can better understand when people come along and say, all X are Y. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're an X? Then you, Y. Mm-hmm. Including stereotypes and prejudices, any form of all X are Y.
Yeah.
All Republicans are cold-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
All liberals are emotionalists and don't use logic.
Right.
All X are Y. In that thread, Holly had mentioned post hoc ergo propter hoc, or false cause and effect.
Yeah.
Which she calls the Domino Theory, or one thing leads to another. Mm-hmm. And of course, she had to link to the 80s band The Fix. And their 80s hit, one thing leads to another.
That's right.
Very cool. John mentioned the IKEA effect, which I don't think I'd ever heard of. But the IKEA effect is a bias in which we love a thing more if we built it ourselves.
Well, you're selling not just the product, but the experience, the adventure.
That's right. But the joke, of course, and there are great memes on this, is if you built it yourself, it's probably not as good as something you could have bought pre-assembled.
Yeah.
And yet, but I built it.
Mm-hmm.
I built that, Obama. So there you go.
I built it, Elizabeth Warren.
Yes.
That's
Dr.
right,
Kevin mentioned reliance on anecdotal evidence, underwritten by cognitive bias. The tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's your prior beliefs or values, which, of course, is very common. And it's a great example of the kind of thing we now know, or at least people who've looked at biases and fallacies know to look out for. Robert S. mentioned, and this was interesting to me. Robert is somebody who's a little more militant than I am. And by a little, I mean substantially more militant than I am. And he pointed out normalcy bias, which is the psychological state of denial which people enter in the event of a disaster. The underestimation of the possibility of the disaster actually happening and its effects on their life and property.
Well, it sounds like kind of a situation where a person cannot process what's going on fast enough to actually act rationally.
Yes. And what was interesting about that to me is that I think I'm prone to the first half of that. Once things start going south, I think I'm very under pressure, but that sense beforehand of, it can't happen here. It's not that I don't think whatever it is, the collapse of civilization, the government taking over the world, the Leviathan, it's not that I don't think it can happen, but I think it won't happen. In other words, the odds are extremely against it. And I think that's something that another reason to be aware of the fallacy is I've got to watch out for that myself. I tend to be an optimist, and that goes a step further than just, being happy that things are so great.
Yeah.
So it's worth watching out for. Since I mentioned Lex Fridman, I can say that the reason I looked up that specific episode 65 was precisely that several people in this thread mentioned Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and recommended it for his, outstanding treatment of biases. Above and beyond his theory that we engage in two kinds of thinking. Level one thinking, the way in which we respond immediately to things. Think the extreme of that being the flow state. And level two thinking being what some of us would call actually thinking. Stopping and actually thinking about what it is that confronts us or what it is we have to think about.
Right.
And level one thinking is the level at which most of these biases kick in.
Yeah.
Level two thinking gives us the opportunity to overcome at least some of them, although some of them are more likely at that level.
Yeah, my understanding in objectivism is the level one is automatization, and level two is actually having to stop and think, check your premises, introspect, try to figure out where you actually got that information, all that.
Yes, that's the philosophical version of it.
Yes.
If you look at it psychologically, you'll get closer to what Kahneman's talking about. But that's exactly the right idea. Finally, Mike Doro, and I only mention his last name because he posts everything public, just like me. Incidentally, it's not that I admire people more who post everything publicly, it's just that I admire them more. So Mike Doro mentions the availability heuristic, the optimism gap, and negativity bias. And basically says all the other ones he's mastered them all. These are the three that he's still working on. The availability heuristic is simply reliance on the examples and data which come to mind when you're evaluating a proposition or a topic. The stuff you already know and that pops up easy for you. Level one items. The optimism gap or optimism bias is the active version of normalcy bias. Bias toward the positive, bias toward optimism. And negativity bias that he says he's also working on, and this one resonated with me. Negativity bias is the experience of bad news mattering more than good news. And how many times have we talked about that?
Oh, yes.
Good news isn't even news. It certainly doesn't make the nightly news. It's bad news. And I've explained several reasons for that. The most obvious one is, well, bad news is something you've got to do something about. If nothing is wrong, nothing needs to be done. There's no emergency. There's no urgency. There's nothing you've got to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting question of when you're trying to flourish and you're trying to get the most out of life and you're trying to embrace your values, how can you set up a sense of urgency for yourself to do that, to actually enjoy your life and embrace your values? There's a question, which we will, I'm sure, discuss in future episodes if we haven't already.
Hell, we might get to it before we're done today.
Oh.
Although I'm really already getting to my homework for the week, which will take us right into the takeaway here.
Well, before you do that...
So what are our folks saying in the chat?
Oh, Linda says, all art is good.
All art is good.
In terms of, yeah.
There's a tautology there.
Yes.
Because all art is good because if it's not good, it's not art. I should mention Amy and I made another trip to the Detroit Institute of Art.
Yes.
This week. We did that last week too. We may have mentioned it on the show. Getting out of the house, getting away from pandemic times. No, we went to the art gallery and we saw art that is art. We spent a good deal of time in the Dutch section of the DIA. And beautiful things.
Very intricate.
I should post photographs. I did take pictures.
Very lovely.
Very inspiring.
Yeah.
They had rearranged things because what we found the week before when we went is that they had brought in some automobiles. And a lot of these were concept designs. And they were doing an exhibition on the design of automobiles. It was very interesting, but it used up a whole corner of the second floor of the museum. Well, what was there before? What was there before was the modern art section. So they moved it. They took that out and they put that in another area. Well, this week we hit that area. And Amy and I walked through the modern art exhibit.
Warhol and other things that we've never seen before. And very colorful, I must say. I must say it's very colorful.
So when Linda Cordair says all art is good, and she puts art in little stars to emphasize art. Although, there are two ways you can look at that.
When Robert was reading aloud The Psychology of Psychologizing, there's a very like super Bernie burn about modern art that she talks about at the very end of that article, and you're like, whoa, that must hurt.
Yes, she compares it to stuff that you can't keep down in your stomach. Yes,
she lit the whole idea that modern art isn't art on fire, and yes. Boy, oh boy.
Yes, and left it in the bedpan.
Oh, Jennifer says, why don't they do what they say? In terms of like hypocrisy kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I am not well versed in logical fallacies, or biases, and I don't know all the names for them, all the special names for them. So I'm sure that there's something in there.
Yeah, I'm guessing she's talking about violations of integrity, but that's going to get us to philosophy more than psychology, which is great. Oh, apparently those are lyrics. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jennifer also, incidentally, when we were talking about Sticky Bun Day, she says she has English muffins with raisins, which are really good, and also a good reason to keep on the extra butter. Oh, my gosh. Oh, carb heaven or carb hell, depending on how you look at it. Well, we'll talk about hell before we're done, too. We're going to get there. So my homework for the week. Oh, I didn't finish up. We did walk through the modern art exhibit.
Yes.
And the funny thing is that we kind of enjoyed it, even though we were laughing most of the way through.
It was just so colorful.
Once you stop thinking of it as art, and that's why I say, Linda puts art in emphasis. Once you stop thinking of it as art, some of it's quite decorative.
It's very decorative.
As long as you don't expect it to mean anything. As long as you don't expect it to be art.
Right.
As long as you don't expect it to do what art does, which is incidentally is one of the reasons it doesn't fit the definition of art. If you expect it to do what art does, if you start taking it as saying something about the world, something about reality, it becomes painful and kind of horrible. But some of it was quite decorative.
It was quite jaunty and joyous in its color scheme.
We probably wouldn't have thought so if we weren't laughing the whole time.
And we were just really, honestly, who isn't suffering from sensory deprivation right now? So...
yes,
it was nice.
It was a good trip. So, I'm going to jump forward a bit here.
Let's do that.
My homework for the week will be to make a list of the top 15 biases and fallacies. I originally intended to separate these out, but it turns out there's all sorts of overlap. So it will make sense to do this together. I will be making a list of the top 15. You think I would have done it for this episode, but I didn't want to cover more than half a dozen that we did this time. I will be making a list of the top 15 biases and fallacies, or biases and fallacies. No, biases and fallacies with a 25-word or less definition and explanation for each. And I will post that online on my social media, so y'all will see it on the platforms with an S at the end, because I'm trying to hit all the platforms.
Great.
Now, what's your homework for the week? You have two choices. Your first option is to write a list of the top 15 biases and fallacies with a 25-word or less definition and explanation for each. Your second option is just to read whatever I put up there.
Okay.
And see if you find it useful. You can choose to either write your own or read mine. But the takeaway is, I think Amy already gave the takeaway. The takeaway is there's a whole science. And I've got a link to, for example, the Wikipedia article, which is really good. And it's a list of biases. But it's about 50 different items.
Right.
All of them are significant. Some of them are really important. But also some of the important ones are already obvious and you already know about them. My point is, you need awareness and some knowledge of the basics. You need to know your potential failure modes. But you don't need to become a PhD in formal and informal logic.
Right.
In fact, that would be a sacrifice. That would be a bad thing. My takeaway is there's a whole science to these, but awareness and some knowledge of the basics is enough. So, how much is enough?
Well, you start at the beginning, because it's the very good place to start. And then you go from there, and then you ask yourself, what is helpful to me?
Exactly right. The question is, what's your purpose? Why are you learning these things?
Yes.
And how much do you need to know in order to get the value?
Yes.
My answer is going to be 15. You got to learn 15 of them and make that list. 25 words or less. If you can't do it in 25 words or less, you don't have it down. Now, I say that in that tone of voice because it's a little bit dismissive. And what I really mean is, once you've learned a few of them, you'll get an idea just how deep you need to get into the subject. Because one of the things that's true is that some of us need this more than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, because of our temperament, because of our cognitive style, because of our purpose in terms of what we do with our time and energy, need this stuff more than others. Some people aren't as vulnerable. Some people who are more mindful in the moment are less prone to engage in level 1 or system 1 thinking. Mm-hmm. And even when they are functioning in a very fast environment, their thoughts and reactions are well considered.
Yep.
Others of us are a little more seat of the pants and need to at least have a standing order to be on the lookout for these things. So the amount of this you need, I say 15, 25 words or less, that's a starting point. You might need a little less than that. You might need a little more than that. You need some. So the answer is not nothing, not everything. Just like Ayn Rand says, you need to have some medical knowledge, but you're never going to be your own doctor.
Right.
You just need to know enough to know when you need a doctor. So too, you need some knowledge of your failure modes, even if you're not going to become a psychologist or a PhD in Aristotelian logic. And yet you need to know enough to know when you're going wrong and do need to look into it more.
Mm-hmm. Before you keep going, I do have some things to talk about.
Please.
I have some anecdotal things, but before that, is there a particular fallacy or bias that would describe somebody who is, well, one of my very favorite concepts in philosophy is the primacy of existence versus the primacy of consciousness, and how some people reverse those, or reverse the emphasis. Or they say, well, your consciousness creates reality somehow. And what you're seeing out there is just kind of an illusion brought about some sort of strange filter or some alien device, who knows.
So is there a psychological analog to that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that, I know that, like in criminology, for instance, you have people who, criminals who really believe that somehow they can actually create their universe through lying, through leading double lives, things like that. But I don't know. I just...
makes me want to pull up Stanton Samonow's book, Inside the Criminal Mind.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And see how he ties that all together, how he describes that.
Right. Narendra says, I am always right. I'm assuming that he means that that's a fallacy.
Well, you could do some creative things with a 4-word sentence like, I am always right.
Yeah.
You really could.
Let's see. Would name
that would name psychological subjectivism. Yeah,
yes.
I'm always right.
Yes.
I'm never wrong. I'm the day after tomorrow.
Says, what was her name again? Eve Layton, right?
Eve Layton from The Fountainhead. That's right.
Yeah.
So before I get to my post-it note of the day, what did you want to share with us?
So I want to just talk about, just in general, kind of a story about myself when I was 18.
You were 18, so this is before I met you.
Yes.
Does anything important happen before I met you? What happened when you were 18?
Before you met me. And this is another, the idea of having being able to be a philosophical detective or a psychological detective, having these kinds of ideas in your toolkit, as it were. and thinking about these sorts of things so that you can understand if something feels off to you, ask yourself, what's really going on here? And slow down your thinking, think slow, and ask yourself, what am I missing here? Why is this person saying this exactly? What is this person's motivation? What are they trying to achieve by saying what they're saying? And so when I was 18, I had just got done reading The Fountainhead. I was still, somewhat of a Nietzschean existentialist, but I was so desperate to find somebody out there who I could talk philosophy with, or even psychology with. I lived in a town that was, there weren't a lot of intellectual types. I'll just say that. And there was a teacher at the high school named, I kid you not, Delton Beowulf. And I'm like, boy, is that ever kind of commensurate with Ellsworth Toohey, Delton Beowulf. So he taught a humanities class, and I really, really wanted to go. I really wanted to take the class. I got into the class, and I had such high expectations. I thought I would be able to actually converse with an intelligent human being. Unfortunately, it was really devastating for me because I eventually just learned that he was just another bully. And in my mind, that was what it was. He was
an intellectual bully?
Yes. But I knew enough, and I read enough Ayn Rand at that point, and I was, astute enough to kind of understand there's something else going on here. I mean, he's teaching a bunch of 18-year-olds in high school nonsense. And it was, as far as I was concerned, it was abusive nonsense. There was no goodwill about it. There was no, let me impart my wisdom so that your life can be better and more easy. There was none of that. It was just garbage. So basically, and again, just a little background, I had been reading for like 3 or 4 years at that point, studying on my own, books on psychology and philosophy and politics. And so I knew a thing or two, but he presented some ideas that were just horrible, including subliminal messaging and advertising. He would basically show us a picture of some sort of, print ad for detergent. And in the background, it would be sort of like this crumply looking fabric, as a backdrop. Fine, crumply looking fabric. And then he has us do an exercise in which we need to find out what the subliminal words are in the crumples. And, one crumply area spells out sex. Like, are you kidding me? Anyway, it would have been funny if it wasn't for the fact that he was extraordinarily consistent in trying to get us to stop trusting our minds, to stop trusting our independent judgment, to stop trusting any kind of critical thinking that we earned up until that point. So basically the idea of subliminal messaging is, our actions can be controlled by outside sources while circumventing our conscious awareness. So, we can't even introspect about it. It's just bizarre. And then he springs another doozy on us. It was Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness. Now, I've heard some other better things from Carl Jung since then, but this particular idea is it's bizarre. So there was a painter, and he showed us these lovely paintings, pretty representational, but they were also very psychedelic, of a painter who claimed that he painted these while he was sleeping. While he was asleep. While he was asleep. He was a somnambulist painter. And Of course. And, yeah. And he was delving into, collective unconsciousness. And, he painted what he saw in the collective unconsciousness. I'm like, are you kidding me? And I didn't have everything figured out, but I knew this guy was a phony. He was an intellectual crook, and I'm very, 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 very grateful that I had read enough to know this, at least to get some inkling that this something's wrong here. Shall I go on? I have a couple more. And perhaps you and our lovely audience have experienced something similar to this. He recounted, this Dalton guy, he recounted how he survived a heart attack a couple of years prior, and that he survived it not because of medical intervention, but because he had this giant poster of this mandala, which is a mystical pattern. I think it's Hindu or something like that. And you look at it and somehow it heals you. And on top of all this, in terms of his explicit bullying behavior, he would stomp his feet. He would take his fists and just, hit them on the table. And he would look at all us in the room with his voice as loud as ever and it's angry, and say, I can't believe anybody out there doesn't believe in God. And, at that time, I was still formulating my thoughts on the subject, but I knew this guy was just, sadistic. So I decided, you know what I did, Robert? I decided to keep attending his class. I didn't drop it. And you'd think, well, I would probably drop it, but no. I wanted to bear witness, and I wanted to understand what was going on. If I felt like Howard Rourke and the Principle of the Dean kind of thing. And but I put some conditions on my staying there, which I didn't tell him, but I had this understanding with myself that number one, I wouldn't do any homework, so I refused to do any of that, and number two, I would barely talk to him. Because I thought to myself, you know what kind of garbage is he giving me? He's giving me less than nothing. I'm not going to give him any of my thoughts. And, at the time, I was actually pretty intimidated too. So I didn't feel comfortable letting him know what I thought about him. But I got an E in that class, and I am still very proud. It's like a badge that I wear. That failed grade. And
well, you were a rebel.
Yeah.
You were not just looking for a solution there, you were looking to make a point.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point too.
I think everybody knows by now you were a punk rocker.
Yes.
As a grade school student.
So yeah, it was but it was very important to me not to give him any of my mind. And I knew that I would figure it out all eventually, and I did. And I'm just so very grateful that I was able to. Because it was torturous.
Yeah.
There's my story.
Well, among the infuriating aspects of that story, you mentioned that he was a fist banger and a shouter and an indignation. And one of the frustrations is because we realize that emotions are not tools of cognition and that rationality is our primary virtue, we risk ceding the domain of passion to these kinds of fools. It's very frustrating that some people come into philosophy with the idea that the Mr. Spock attitude is ideal. That if you're going to choose reason, that you must abandon emotion. And I think that the most passionate people should be the most rational people. It's the objectivists who should have the monopoly on passion. Incidentally, and I have to mention this before we get anywhere near wrapping up here, Narendra mentioned Edith Packer. And I had considered including that in our discussion today, but I need to find the resources on that. Edith Packer, in discussing core evaluations, gave a great list of emotions and their causes. And she's since passed away, and since then a few other people have done that exercise as well. I think maybe Ellen Kenner's done it. I'm pretty sure Tara Smith has. And I need to find that. So if anybody's got a handle or a lead or a source for the discussion of the causes of emotions, Fear is the belief that one of your values is at risk, that you may lose that value. Anger is the emotion that follows an unjust loss of a value or an attack. All of the emotions, but with the specific cause of the emotion. We mentioned 2 episodes ago that love does have causes, and it even does have a definition. It's your emotional response to values. All of the other emotions that we experience, or at least the primary ones, this kind of analysis has been done. So Narendra is right to bring up Edith Packard. You may be able to find that if you look around online. When I do, I will be posting links to it. Enormously valuable stuff, and should be part of this discussion if we were to carry it on for a couple more hours.
Which we could do.
But we're not going to. My Post-it note for the week. My Post-it note for the week says, the easiest way to increase happiness is to control your use of time. It's a little longer than my usual Post-it note for the week. The easiest way to increase happiness is to control your use of time. Those of you who are watching this on camera may be able to see there are quotation marks around that. That's actual Daniel Kahneman saying that, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow. The easiest way to increase happiness is to control your use of time. Now, John had made a post yesterday on Facebook, which, if you ever see me react to a post using the wow reaction, it's because a post has made an impression on me, but none of the other reactions fit, and sometimes I'm not even sure what I think of it. In this case, I'm still figuring it out. I'm going to read it, and then you decide what you think of it, and you'll see why it had an impact on me. You'll also see how it relates to the Daniel Kahneman quote. John wrote, "The hour of hell is a daily thing." The hour of hell. Capital H, yeah. The hour of hell is not for doing things you want to do. It's for doing things you want to be done with. The things which make you cry when you do them. The things you need to do but have left undone for too long. And then he writes, "My hour of hell is from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. But I can begin or end it earlier if I'm ready. My daily workout's not part of my hour of hell because it's something I actually want to do." And then he says his workout's between 6 and 7:30 a.m., after which he has a protein beverage, shower, and dress. The hour of hell is the first thing I do once dressed. When you start looking forward to the hour of hell, then you're really making progress. And finishing the hour of hell is always a mood boost. And he wraps up saying, try putting an hour of hell into your day. Then enjoy the rest of your day, a lot more than you would have otherwise. Don't spread out the hell. Pack it all into 1 hour each day.
Jennifer says, cleaning the cat litter boxes.
There you go. It's a brilliant idea, because there are so many things that we do that we are glad we get them done, but they're not fun in the moment. And and if you're friends with John, you'll see in the thread he gives a couple more examples of specific things. But Daniel Kahneman says the easiest way to increase happiness is to control the use of your time. Now, I would say that would be the easiest way to increase your happiness is to act with intention. To know your intention, know your purpose in any given moment.
Yeah.
But his point is to control that, which goes more to the psychology than the philosophy of it. And so naturally that made me think of John's post from yesterday. Incidentally, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that one time my company had me go through one of those Fred Pryor business courses.
I don't know what Fred Pryor is. What is that?
It's sort of like he's kind of equivalent to a Zig Ziglar kind of thing.
Okay.
The best ways to think of your work day and how to get things done, how to be more efficient, and all of that stuff. And I think there was a term called "eat the frog."
Eat the frog.
Yes, and
start your day by eating a frog, and everything else in your day will be better than that.
Yes,
is that
that's
the one?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's an old business or old psychology. I don't even know what you call that. It's an old expression.
Right.
But yeah,
Business psychology.
Start your day by eating a live frog. Everything else in your day will be better than that.
Yes.
Well, there
you go.
If I ate a live frog, that would certainly give me an hour of hell. I'll tell you what, Daniel Kahneman is brilliant. And if you listen to some interviews with him, which I did, if you read his book, incidentally, I haven't finished the book. I've read the introduction. I've read the first chapter. I don't know what happened to the book. I ordered it. I looked on Amazon. I ordered it 6 days after it was released. And I don't know where our Dead Tree version of it is, so I've been reading it on Kindle.
Dead Tree version.
Oh, yeah, our print edition. Yes. So when I was looking up, well, what's my Post-it note for the week? I was looking at, well, what are Daniel Kahneman quotes? The man is brilliant in psychology, but what a mixed bag he is in philosophy. Oh my gosh. Here, a couple quotes real quick. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. That's one of those things that in psychology, that's a great cautionary tale, but in philosophy, that's a horrible thing to say. Our comforting conviction that the world makes sense rests on a secure foundation, our almost unlimited ability to ignore our ignorance.
Wah, wah.
Money does not buy you happiness, but lack of money certainly buys you misery. That one I like. I think I learned that one initially from Tony Robbins, who used to say that, money may not be the most important thing in the world, but show me a person who's in want of money and is happy, and, that's a miracle. Anyway, yeah, money does not buy you happiness, but lack of money certainly buys you misery. Well, that tells me money is a prerequisite of happiness. Now, a good relationship with money, I would say, is a requirement of happiness, whether you're rich or simply where you want to be. The idea that the future is unpredictable is undermined every day by the ease with which the past is explained. See, well, besides having System 1, System 2 thinking, he has this sense that you have two different identities. You have the you that actually lives and does things and makes choices, and then you have that self-identity that is essentially the sum of your memories, the things that you've chosen and the things that you're able to remember. In the Lex Fridman interview, he brings up the example that if you were planning your vacation and all you cared about was your experiences, you would plan a very different vacation than if you were planning your vacation also wanting to build good memories.
Wait a minute. I have to have you reread that again. I'm sorry.
I didn't read it. I'm just doing it from memory, which means I probably got it wrong. But the idea is, let's say we're going to go to Jamaica. Yeah. We're going to plan a bunch of things we're going to do. If we were planning just to have the best possible vacation in the moment, we might schedule these 10 things. But if we're also realizing I want to have good memories of this afterward, that changes what we put on that list. Because our sense of self is not of us in the moment. Our sense of self is what we remember of ourselves. So there are two different people. There's the remembered self, the narrative you've built up of yourself. Yeah. He uses the word stories. He talks about story a lot. Not so much narrative, but that idea. And then there's the actual self, the self in the moment, the you you're experiencing. Because we don't remember everything. Memory is very selective. It's finite. It's limited. Anyway, point is, brilliant guy, brilliant on psychology. Yeah. I have a few issues with him on philosophy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if with that quote, though, was this supposed to be some sort of mutually exclusive thing he's talking about? Because
it's not that they're mutually exclusive. It's just that they're different. And the remembered self is a subset. Okay. Because you don't remember everything.
Well, that's why I include in my vacations the sense of anticipation many months before. That is part of the happiness of the whole package.
Yeah, you're certainly a more in the moment person. And in this kind of context, that's a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. All right.
But you kind of, right at the beginning, you kind of gave the point of this episode, which again is, psychology is a thing.
Yes.
You don't need to become a PhD. You don't have to become an expert in biases and fallacies, but you do. And maybe I should emphasize this more. You do need to learn what they are, learn what the common ones are, learn how to be on the lookout for the kind that you might not even know and might not even have a name for. You got to know this is a thing.
Yes.
You got to know something. You don't have to know everything, but you got to know something. It's kind of like with philosophy. You know, I'm not an academic philosopher. There are things I do not know about philosophy at all, and other things I think I know that I have only the slightest grasp of. You got to know philosophy. You don't have to be a PhD, but you got to know.
Yes.
Well, it turns out psychology is the same thing.
Yep.
So again, I'll be doing that homework assignment. I will post that. Y'all can read it, or you can do your own version of it. The 15 most important fallacies and biases.
Narendra says, a good tip on psychology is by Leonard Peikoff. You cannot escape the painful duty of managing mixed premises in the practical world.
You know, that's brilliant, because no matter how psychologically or philosophically healthy we are,
right,
we do live in a world that will make you pay for your virtues. And yet you'll have to decide to be virtuous anyway.
Yes.
You know, just like you do live in a world that even when you're psychologically healthy and have great clarity, you're going to see and experience things that will test your psychology, that will hurt you.
Yes.
And that is a reality. It's not an ideal world.
Right.
But parts of it are.
Yeah.
And we do the best we can.
And with that, I just want to really quickly talk about a lady named Jodi Shaw who worked at, I think it's Smith University in Massachusetts.
Jodi Shaw.
And you should all watch her videos. They're short, but she has, if you really want to see the type of grit and perseverance and heroic stamina a person can have in the face of nonsense. It's very similar to what I went through when I was 18. She is up against the idea of biological determinism that has been being promoted in her university, and shaming and guilt and everything like that with regard to racism. And separating your actions from your skin color. Anyway, her story is something that you should all look at, and it's extraordinarily inspirational. And she's still fighting the good fight. And
does she have a podcast or a website or a series of YouTube videos?
Yeah, a series of YouTube videos. So just look up Jodi Shaw.
Good. I will look that up and add it to the show notes.
Yes. Which
will be available within 10 minutes after the end of this show.
Yes. Yeah, very interesting.
Oh, Jodi, Jodi.
Yeah, Jodi.
Okay, good. Well, we will add that to the show notes and link to what Amy recommends, which I haven't seen yet, so I will take a look as well.
It's good stuff.
Well, this has been a longer discussion than I expected. But it's not over yet, because we are going to revisit those 15 items. We are, as Narendra suggests, going to look at Edith Packer's work on core evaluations and the sources of emotions. We're not done with psychology, but we did a bit, and that's my recommendation to you, is do a bit. And with that said, show notes for this episode will be available within 10 minutes after the end of the episode. You will be able to click the links to all the stuff we've talked about and more while you're enjoying a sticky bun or whatever other outrageous high carbohydrate treat you've got at your disposal. Questions or comments about the episode, suggestions for future episodes can and should be posted on the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group or on the comment thread of this discussion. If you haven't already, go to youtube.com/Robert Nasir. If you're already watching the episode there, please click the thumbs up, the like. That would help a lot. And if you're not, consider going there and doing that, even if you're just watching on Facebook. I shouldn't say just watching on Facebook. We love that you're watching on Facebook, but we are working on getting those YouTube numbers up. And if you would like to support the show financially, you know what to do. Patreon.com/Robert Nasir. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts, or the top of our hearts, To those who are already supporting us at patreon.com, you give us the motivation to keep doing this. Oh my gosh, show number 51. One more show left before we get to that anniversary episode, which actually, let's see, say 21, 28. It's kind of, we had an episode 0.
Yes.
We did have a preview episode, so really the next episode is kind of the anniversary. Which, the first episode was March 1st. The next episode is one day before March 1st, February 28th. In any event, exciting things are coming. Big plans. Next episode should be awesome as we celebrate our 1 year of doing this. Can't thank you enough for joining us in it. Thank you so much. And we wish each of you success. We wish each of you flourishing. We wish each of you the psychological power to handle the interesting stuff going on between your ears at the same time as you're achieving mastery over the philosophical dimension, as we all are, those of us who are fans of objectivism. And as always, we wish you, from the bottom of our hearts and the top of our complex psychological minds, we wish you love.